What is your price? Because if your price is not your life, then you are for sale. Welcome back to the next episode of My Price is My Life. Today's guest is Madison Cawthorn. But first, we'll talk about our sponsors. Get started on your gold IRA today or purchase gold and silver bars at Coinage at O'KeefeMediaGold.com, O'KeefeMediaGold.com. I think gold is approaching $4,000 an ounce. Take action, get the facts, protect your future, O'KeefeMediaGold.com. Today's guest is Madison Cawthorn, who joins me live from West Palm Beach in studio, a former congressman from North Carolina's 11th District, Asheville.
That is correct.
Who made history as the youngest member of Congress at just 25 years old. But before he was a congressman, Madison was in a devastating car crash at the age of 18 that left him with a spinal cord injury and dependent on a wheelchair, which he's here in today. He has said he was declared dead on the scene. The accident ended the hopes of his attending U.S. Naval Academy and forced a complete reimagining of his life, which we'll get into a little bit today. Madison has made some statements about open secrets in Washington regarding blackmail, parties, sex, drugs. We'll get into that as well. And after a high-profile term and even a higher-profile exit, Madison Cawthorn is now making a return, looking to make a return back to Congress in Florida's 19th District. Is that right?
That is correct.
In Naples, Southwest Florida area. Madison's story touches on ambition, controversy, and what happens when someone challenges the system from the inside. Madison, thank you for being here today.
Well, James, you're a great friend. It's always an honor to be around you, brother.
And welcome to our headquarters here in
This
Florida.
is significantly better than I'll say New Jersey. I love it here. This is great. Your team's fantastic. The view of the water, you really can't beat it. So.
It's really great. And we're both kind of from the upper mid-Atlantic, Northeast. And
Indeed.
Here we are in Florida. Okay, so let's get right into it. Cocaine and congressional orgies and parties. How about that for an opener? 2022, you made some headlines after publicly claiming that some members of Congress had invited you to parties involving sex, drugs, etc. And that sparked immediate backlash from Republicans and the media. And the comment set off what many saw as a coordinated effort to discredit you, remove you from power. Can you just kind of set this up? Go back to when that happened and kind of set up what happened there.
Absolutely. So I had a pretty consequential term in office. We were in the minority, was still able to move legislation through. I got there right as the COVID pandemic was really kicking off. Things were getting crazy. And then, right as I'm first there, January 6th starts, I think, on my third day being sworn into office. And so it was just an incredible backdrop to start a congressional term out on. And then as we're going through that, obviously we're in the minority. Biden is the president. And so there's just a lot of targets to punch at all times. There's a lot of infighting with the Republican Party at that time from the conservative, staunchest of conservatives in the House, and then some of the more establishment Republicans. And so anyways, I was trying to punch above my weight class, do what I could do in the area. And, so many of us growing up in America know of the open secrets that go on in Washington, D.C., just kind of how corrupt everything is. You can read books about this kind of stuff. You can watch TV shows that just kind of dramatize what goes on in Washington, D.C.
House of Cards.
House of Cards. Yeah, exactly. And so anyways, I went on a podcast with a friend of mine, and we were discussing just things that I had witnessed in D.C.
Who's the guy? Who is the friend?
This was John Lovell. Yeah,
John Lovell.
Really good guy. And anyway, so I'm on his podcast. He's asking about, so what are some surprising things you've seen in Washington, D.C.? And, it has been talked about by members of Congress for quite a long time. I think Tim Burchett just came out talking about how they will use honeypot operations, trying to take down members of Congress and be able to coerce them, be able to blackmail them, this kind of thing. And anyway, so I was just talking about this not as if I was breaking news, just kind of like how different Washington, D.C. is than from the rest of America. And then that all of a sudden initiated a massive onslaught from the Republican establishment and from the media all around. But during that time, I had made some enemies in different massive organizations around the country, made some enemies within my own party, made a lot of enemies on the other side.
Why did you make enemies in your own party?
I think coming in with such a new perspective, being so young as a member of Congress and just not really accepting the status quo. I'd grown up my whole life. I'm sure you've experienced something similar. Many people just oftentimes, they'll pontificate about how poorly the country's going, how bad things are, how we need to get things back on track. And things were getting back on track under, Trump 1.0. But then when we see the election get stolen, we see all this craziness going on, I didn't feel like there was enough ferocity in the leadership inside of Congress. And so I was pushing things very aggressively. I was trying to, get massive legislation passed, or trying to just question the status quo, saying, why are we just acting like we don't want to rock the boat? The boat is sinking.
Was it ageism because you were so young? Was there some of that too?
I think that may have been a part of it. I do remember I was approached by a member of leadership saying, you shouldn't go on the news so much. It makes some of the other members who've been here a long time not happy that, you're getting more airtime than they are.
Almost a form of envy, ageism.
I would say that possibly could. Because for most people, going to Congress is the best thing they'll ever do in their life. For most people, it's the capstone to their career. They feel like they're really going into this amazing place and they deserve to be there. All this stuff is incredible. Because I remember when I first got elected, I ran when I was 24 years old. Once I was sworn, I was 25. And my first few days, I'm saying, man, how did I get elected? How did God, bless me so much? How did I get this amazing blessing to be able to serve my country and make a real difference for people? But then after being there for a few days, I started looking around and being like, how the hell did these people get elected? I mean, these people don't represent our values whatsoever. These people lie to their constituents on a regular basis. These people say that they're going to do one thing, then they do the exact opposite. And that's on both sides of the aisle. And really watching it from a citizen's point of view my entire life growing up, and then being there behind the scenes, seeing exactly how much of a uniparty there really is, which thankfully so much of that is changing since the Trump era has come out. I used to say there's maybe 30 or 40 good congressmen in Washington, D.C. I would say now it's probably 55, pushing 60. But aside from that, there really is a uniparty, especially because when you have the deep state bureaucrats, the unelected party, these people who truly are the enemy of the working class, the muscular class, the people who just, they're impossible to fire. They were not elected to the position. They do not constitutionally have lawmaking power, but we have abdicated our ability in the House to just say, hey, well, we don't want to have tough questions during election season. So we're just going to let the executive branch and all these different smaller agencies be able to go around and make all of these executive decisions that affect real life Americans and their actual tax dollars.
Do you think that these, when you came to D.C. and you saw these members of Congress, what struck you first between what you thought it would be like and what it actually was like?
Lack of courage. That was my number one thing.
Lack of courage.
Lack of courage. Just because when you think about it, there have been so few congressmen in our nation's history, relative to how many citizens we've had in our nation's history. And then so when you're given that position, when the people elect you to do that job, to me, it's an honor of service. You get to just go and serve. You're not there to care about re-election. You're there to care about saving the country and doing what's right and doing what you said you would do.
I think someone said recently, because this is called the Price is My Life podcast, that the price of, I think it was Massey who said the price is their reelection.
That's exactly
They'll do
right.
anything to get elected. Okay, so we have the clip, guys. If we can pull a clip of on the podcast, Madison's interview discussing that in the Blackmail situation as they're put. Here it is.
People, a lot of them that I've looked up to through my life, I've always paid attention to politics, guys that then all of a sudden you get invited to, like, well, hey, we're going to have kind of a sexual get-together at one of our homes. You should come. And I'm like, what did you just ask me to come to? Yeah. And then you realize they're asking you to come to an orgy. Yeah. Or the fact that, there's some of the people that are leading on the movement to try and remove, addiction in our country. And then you watch them do, a key bump of cocaine right in front of you.
Wow. So sort of the hypocrisy of lawmakers who are against drugs. I saw a big cocaine bust this morning on local news, and I'm thinking, how many of these guys are doing cocaine in law enforcement? It's just rampant hypocrisy in Congress.
That's what you see so often in Washington, D.C. I mean, whether it's on the policy positions they take, or if it's their personal life, how they conduct themselves, or if it's just how they treat you to your face. And I mean, obviously, I know you deal with this often, but people are so two-faced. I know you dealt with this Phoniness. That's the biggest thing. And, especially being from, more of a country lifestyle, normally when a guy shakes your hand or tells you something's going to get done, you expect them to do that. Not only do it, but do it to the best of their ability. Really follow through to the spirit of their word, not just to the detail of their word.
I mean, you're coming to D.C. as a 25-year-old guy. I'm sure you wanted to make a difference, and you're surrounded by all this evil and phoniness. And I mean, how do you, I mean, it's at a human level, because I deal with that as a journalist who's not a politician, but How do you deal with that? How did you get through that time period?
The most difficult thing was to just be able, because obviously, one, I'm significantly younger than all the people that were around me, but just being able, trying to just grab them, want to shake them and say, man, I'm in a wheelchair. My spine broke in half. It was a burst fracture, and I have more backbone than you do. What are you doing? Why do you not stand up for the people? And then you watch these people, they go and try and make all these backroom deals, and you see it often. The people that pontificate the loudest seem like they're the strongest for you. When it comes time for the really big votes, the omnibus packages, the NDAA, the different packages that really fund the majority of our government, you will see them cave and capitulate so often. But now, oftentimes, this is not the fault of individual congressmen. Oftentimes, this is the fault of the fact that we don't have single subject spending bills. So
what is that? What is a single subject
So what
spending
we
bill?
should have in this country is a single subject funding bill. So when you want to go fund something, say you want to make the VA a better place for veterans. You want them to be able to get the service they need quickly, efficiently, and with a high degree of care. But normally, if you're going to go do that, obviously that is a very ambitious and good thing that a member of Congress wants to accomplish. But when you see how the Democrats and how people, members of both sides, and I call it the uniparty, how the uniparty acts, they'll then inject these poison pills into those massive spending packages. And so once they inject those poison pills in, it sounds like, so let's say that they make the Sunshine and Puppies Act. And then so you want to go and you are now voting against the Sunshine and Puppies Act because apparently it funds trans ideology that's going to infect the minds of 4-year-olds all across the country and convince little boys to chop the tallywhackers off and believe that they can be a girl or a unicorn or what have you because their minds are malleable at the time. And so then you want to vote against it because, you know, inside the Sunshine and Puppies bills has this ridiculous trans ideology in it. But then on the mainstream media, they'll just go around saying, well, look, that means Madison Cawthorn hates sunshine and puppies. How un-American of him. But nothing could be further from the truth. You want to vote for sunshine and puppies. We all love sunshine and puppies. But when you start looking at what the actual details of the bills are, normally this is what I tell most Americans if I'm talking to them about how to understand DC. Whatever the better the subject name of the bill is, normally the worse the contents are. If it has a really boring name, it's probably going to do exactly what you would expect it to do.
It's inversely proportional to how great the name is.
That's exactly correct.
And the Patriot Act, what's your perspective on that?
I'm hugely against the Patriot Act. Now, obviously, you know, I think I was 6 years old when the towers fell. And then as that started coming out, I don't think I was following politics nearly enough at the time to, you know, really be listening to Ron Paul and understanding, you know, the ability we're going to have for that to become a surveillance state executed against the American people. But I think we have seen that all across America today. In today's day and age, you know, I oftentimes start, because I used to pray about all the time, maybe this is all my fault for the season that we're living through in our country, because I used to pray, man, God, I don't want to live a life that is one where I'm not making a difference. You know, if something bad is going to happen, let it happen in my lifetime so it doesn't have to happen in my children's lifetime. And man, did God answer my prayer. You know, we had the towers fall. Then we had, you know, the weapons of mass destruction lie that was peddled and sent all around. We had them saying that it was these people in the Taliban that actually blew up our buildings. But actually, everybody there was Saudi. And for some reason, we found the perfect passports just laying a few miles away from the wreckage. It was all absolutely ridiculous. But then you watch how that then catapulted us into a massive surveillance state going on all across the world. You launched us into immeasurable amounts of debt. You lost so many people in my generation, the generation above me, losing limb and life and their sanity to go fight a war that was based on a lie. It's a war really utilized for the bankers, for people who want to be able to make money and profit off the bloodshed of young American men and women.
It seems like most politics, to me, from an outsider, it's about money. Is that what you found too in D.C.? Is it about just making money, self-interest, self-dealing?
You know, I would say that's more so for the people that influence the politicians. You know, you see the insider trading and stuff that goes on with members of Congress, and you watch how people's, you know, amount of wealth goes from, you know, maybe being worth $100,000 when they get into office, and then being, you know, in the deca of millions. But I would say it's the people that influence members of Congress and influence their re-election campaigns. Because really, if you think about it from a shrewd businessman's perspective, $1 million in a super PAC to go against it, your cut of the mill, just normal Republican congressman in some rural district is a lot of money that can greatly affect a primary challenge to them. But So why does it not cost so much money if they were just going to take $1 million to put on the table to then get a $100 billion contract with the United States government? Of course, everyone's going to make that budget. That's just the cost of doing business.
Article, throw it up on the screen, guys. Madison Cawthorn's problem is that he picked a fight with Koch brother Mini-Me. It's one thing to subhead. It's one thing to star in the Rodeo Clown Caucus. Now they get nasty. So what was this? Who is the Koch brother Mini-Me?
You know what? That's from Esquire, so I don't normally know what they're talking about there. I picked a lot of fights with a lot of the big names on both sides of the aisle. Just these are the people who are not in Congress, but the people who would kind of affect what happens in Congress.
So what made you this way to pick fights with people like that and have the balls to do this sort of thing? Why are you the way that you are?
Because I was born for such a time as this. There's evil in this
world. You were born
world.
this way.
I was born this way. Yeah,
God
100%.
gave it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is so wrong for people to want to be raised as dragon slayers and then find out that there's actual dragons to be slain in the world. And so for anyone that has been gifted that amount of courage and that amount of ability to be able to go out and do something great, to not do it is a spit in the face of God who designed you with a purpose in mind to go out and execute his vision for your life. Because I always tell people, you are invincible until your purpose that God has for you on this earth is over. And so if you ever are killed or pass away, and unless you're wildly outside of God's path for you on earth, then I think that your mission was accomplished. We are a part of a grand tapestry that God is kind of crafting behind the scenes. And it might not always make sense looking at, a beautiful blanket from the backside of it. But when you actually start looking at the finished product and where you fit into that, it's an honor to be of service to, God and to your country. And, we're called to take care of the welfare of our nation. And so when there are people who want to manipulate the minds of good-hearted Americans and try and get them to back people who do not have their best interests at heart, it is your duty to fight them and fight them shrewdly and powerfully.
This is James O'Keefe. You know me for exposing the truth and holding the corrupt elite responsible and accountable. However, today I want to tell you about protecting your own freedom, your finances. Before you buy any gold or silver, hear this. We're going through one of the biggest financial shifts of our lifetime. De-dollarization. Nations like China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia are pulling away from the US dollar. And that threatens your savings and retirement security. Legendary investor Ray Dalio warns skyrocketing debt, relentless money printing, and a weakening dollar are all part of a dangerous cycle that could impact you. That's why more Americans are turning to real assets like physical gold and silver. Gold just surged past $3,700 per ounce, and momentum is building. I've partnered with veteran-owned American Independence Gold to help you take action. Open a qualifying account today and get up to $10,000 in bonus gold and our free gold protection guide. And here's the best part. A portion of every sale supports Tunnel to Towers and Wounded Warriors. Freedom isn't given, it's secured. This is James O'Keefe. As always, this is not financial advice. Always check with your licensed financial advisor before you invest. Let's go back to this blackmail stuff. So was there a specific moment when you felt compelled to speak out, when you were like, you know what, I'm just going to go public with this?
Well, again, I'll tell you, the one thing I was talking about, and I think in the subject you're asking about, I didn't know I was making anything widely public. And I think if you ask most Americans all around the country, they would all be like, yeah, I completely understand. That's exactly what happens in Washington, D.C. But I don't think that was actually the reason that I got attacked so hard. I think that was just used as
a pretense.
As the pretense to do so. There's so many reasons. I mean, you saw it with Project Veritas. People started wanting to attack you based on helicopter flights and ridiculous things like
black
that.
Cars.
Exactly. It was
a pretense.
It's a pretense. It has no bearing on the actual reasons.
And yet a lot of people don't exactly understand how that works. They, even to this day, people say, like Joe Rogan says, whatever happened with James O'Keefe and Project Veritas? So still there's some confusion. People may not know exactly how it works and why they use that as a pretense.
I think that's one of the most frustrating things is that, especially when you are wronged in such a public and grand spectacle, you want your side of the facts to be able to get out. Because, the proverb says how everyone's argument sounds right until the cross-examination. But the problem is with the mainstream media is that they are able to enact a hit job on you, but then you're never able to get the cross-examination out with the exact same amount of gusto or the amount of reach that they are being able to do so on.
I was checking out these books. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, The One Nation Under Blackmail, Whitney Webb, and this is a very fact-intensive book. It talks a lot about the former director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, and a lot of stuff like that. Just just how dirty, just how I mean, in this book, and I don't know if this is true. I'm reading it because it's all over the internet, but you know how he was gay and he had affairs and you know, it's kind of projecting that, but just evil stuff. They're trying to.
And I think something to notice is that they'll normally use whatever they think is your weakness. So if you are not good with money, you know, they'll try and rack up your debt.
Who's they?
Again, it's the ominous they. You know, they is the people who wants to control the levers of money that are being poured around the world, around the country, because you know, we're the greatest economic motivator in the entire planet. You know, we can, with our soft power through Hollywood and through our music industry, through our ability to fund massive operations and government programs that enrich hundreds and thousands of people on a daily basis. You know, there's people that want to take advantage of those money spigots, and they're willing to do so, even if it means destroying somebody's life. And so what I see happen often is that, let's say if you're a super religious man or you have a great family with great children, you know, they'll probably try and catch you in some kind of a honeypot operation. And I always tell people when they're first getting elected to Congress, I was like, hey, you did not magically get more attractive or more funny. If you are at some random bar somewhere in the world and you have 3 10s walk up to you and they all 3 desperately want to take you home, I was like, I promise they met you there on purpose.
Did that happen to you?
You know what? I whether it did or didn't, I never took the bait. So, you know, I never had to suffer the
power,
consequences
as Henry
of that.
Kissinger said, power is the ultimate aphrodisiac.
That is indeed.
In D.C.
It is indeed.
But certainly, that was the legacy of Charlie Kirk. I mean, he was just so, he had integrity, he had talent, he was the least hypocritical man ever. And so when this happened, because I do want to get a little more into the Blackmail and Epstein thing, and we have a clip, team, and you interviewed with me regarding this. This was the Titus Warren, the black dude who I was undercover with him.
I remember doing that, yes.
And I asked for your reaction. So if we can pull up this Titus Warren clip, here we go.
Sex parties and blackmail were first spoken about by former United States Representative Madison Cawthorn back in March 2022. The congressional staffer we spoke to states these are very real, and he said it happens more than people think. We reached out to Madison Cawthorn and got his reaction.
Well, I mean, I've never been to a party like this. I've been invited to them. My instant reaction to that is, you know, especially the blackmail piece that it seemed like this individual was talking about in this piece. You know, that's something that I experienced firsthand. You know, as soon as it's kind of a latent threat, it's kind of just an understood thing in Washington. It's not something that's ever really said to you, but it's well known that, you know, people can always have leverage points on you.
Well, anyway, yeah, and this remember that guy Titus?
I remember taking this interview. I was lying down on my stomach for I think 4 weeks, and when you reached out, I was happy to have something to.
That was well done. You know, positioning yourself, because it looks like you could be in an airport. I think you're in the hospital.
I was indeed. Yeah.
But I don't know, team. Do you have the Titus Warren clip? This was one of the Capitol Hill staffers. This was me on the gay date. The gays are very chatty with me. They like me. I'm not sure the gays care who's on the date with them. Be very politically incorrect on that one. But we don't have the Titus Warren clip, but this was one of the undercover swiper videos that we did. And then the Epstein situation. I want to get your perspective on this, because recently we've interviewed 2 Department of Justice officials. One of them seemed very liberal, very strange man. We codenamed him Leather Daddy because he dresses like he's a Harley Davidson biker. And the other guy, we caught him in an airport on an airplane talking about Bill Clinton on the planes. Team, do you have those clips? We can pull those up.
Do you think
Check this out. And we're going to throw this on the screen so you don't have to turn all the way around. There we go. This is how we call him Leather Daddy.
This is Leather Daddy.
DOJ guy. Watch this.
Epstein will actually get released or not at all?
If it does, it'll be heavily redacted, and his name won't be in it.
Those files do exist.
There's files.
Yeah.
For sure. There's thousands and thousands of pages of files. But again, if they're released in any way, it's going to be very redacted. They'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those files, leave all the liberal, Democratic people in those files, and have a very slanted version of it come out where it's like, look at what he's doing without releasing any of their bad behavior.
Okay, so this guy's obviously taking it from a very liberal, democratic perspective, but he's a Bureau of Prisons guy. He's an intel guy, works with Ghislaine Maxwell. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, this is the one thing that I'll say when people started accusing Donald Trump of being within the files. I think if the Democrats had that at their disposal while they were in charge of the DOJ and the FBI, I think they absolutely would have used it. So I think that whole narrative that, well, the reason they're not releasing it is because of this. I think that there's probably definitely some geopolitics at play here, some very wide-spanning blackmail that can be used on a lot of people. I absolutely think that Epstein was a government agent. I don't know for whose government. I'm sure
Intelligence or
intelligence for
CIA?
sure. Whether it was for the CIA or for a foreign agency, there's several very adept agencies all around the world. And so, I would say there's probably any number of 6 national agencies that would be able to orchestrate such a thing. But almost anything in that world has to come from, it has to have the blessing of the CIA.
Okay, team, let's go to the next Epstein clip. This is Glenn Prager. This is a huge story released a couple weeks ago in an airplane. Let's play this clip talking about Epstein being a CIA informant.
That's because no, it's not talked about yet, but it'll soon come out that he was a CIA informant.
He was a CIA informant.
He wasn't a CIA. So DOJ was settling the case, and they were just letting him, do house arrest and they minimized his arrest. Part of that is because all the victims kept on flipping, and they didn't have anyone to go to trial with. The more importantly part is they didn't want to go after him. He was an asset for the United States and Israel for the CIA. I just know that's what he was, and that's why he was protected so long for this. And people turned a blind eye about all this garbage that he was doing in the United States. He had a lot of secrets. More about Israeli stuff than anything else. I mean, he was doing stuff for Israel and the United States. He was, he's working for both.
Your reaction to that?
Well, before we get into my reaction to that, what has been your response? I mean, what has been the response to you after releasing these clips?
I think a lot of people were upset at the president for saying over the summer, because I was at the Turning Point thing, the Charlie's thing in July, and every single person on stage was talking about Epstein. Were you there for that one? SAS,
I was, yes.
Tampa. And I was struck because when I was on stage, I said, how many of you, because the DOJ put out that memo and it said, there's kind of nothing to see here. I don't know if you remember that. There's no blackmail, there's no files. And every one of those people in the audience, it was 8,000 people, they all thought the Department of Justice was lying. And I was struck by that because this is the Republican base. This is the MAGA crowd. So I've never seen anything like that before, So that was the first thing. And the second thing was just the whole Israel, I don't really take a position on it, but there's a schism, it seems to me, in the Republican Party over this issue. And a lot of that's murmuring behind the scenes and donors taking out money from Turning Point. So that was the reaction to that. And then the reaction to this was a continuation of the theme, which was that it seems like people believe what they want to believe on this issue. And here's a guy inside the Department of Justice who's basically, I think it's exonerating Trump. He's saying Trump wasn't on the planes, but saying some other things about Epstein being CIA and a foreign asset.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think that what we've learned about the Epstein files has completely exonerated 47 for sure. But I think the biggest catch-22 that the administration's probably caught in is that if Biden was in control of these files for so long and there was no real good chain of custody on the actual files, whatever those files are, and I know that there was a committee in Congress that released a massive batch of them, and I know some people were upset because it was released in a certain fashion or another way. But anyways, they got the files out, and I think people were upset that they actually had to go through and read all 30,000 pages instead of being able to just type names in. But I just am so curious about what is actually going to still be in there after the Biden DOJ and Biden FBI had access to these things for so long. I mean, you saw how weaponized their government was against people. And so, do I think the messaging could have been more on point from the administration on exactly what was there or what was left? And, going to leave no stone unturned? Most likely.
I think people are upset about the binders thing and how that was handled. That's an open secret. Everyone's upset
and
about
again,
that.
I feel like that was more Pam Bondi's, and then it was POTUS'
What's your
decision.
perspective on her?
Well, so far they're doing a great job of going after some of the deep state actors that we've been mad at for about the last decade in the conservative movement. So I'm really liking that. I do know that, especially being in Congress, how our federal government is designed to work slowly, designed so by the founders to make sure that, no one government can make too much change at one time before the people had an opportunity to voice their opinions. And so I understand that there's difficulties, but I have to tell you, James, I think that we're facing unprecedented asymmetric civil warfare breaking out across the country.
Asymmetric civil warfare.
I'm not being facetious in that.
What do you mean by that?
I'm not using hyperbole. So when we're talking about asymmetric warfare, it's when people are using uncharacteristic, unnatural, and not equal tactics in a desired conflict. And I think you've seen this come from the left for about the last decade, and probably even before that. But I know that especially since Barack Obama took office, we have seen violence, racial splits expand so much in this country. We've seen riots go so crazy. We have people ambushing ICE officers. Both of our friend Charlie Kirk was assassinated. There are death threats going on left and right. I'm sure you get them very often. Just as
Do you get death threats?
I do. Yeah, yeah. I remember Antifa came to my house one time, and thank God, I just had to put my dog down, Beowulf. What a great dog! But anyways, he was phenomenal that night. But they came and they had cut out a bunch of my campaign signs and stuck them to the
Antifa. Really?
Yeah, and they'd cut off my head from all these campaign signs and glued them to my driveway. It was a sloping driveway, and then used red paint to kind of make it look like blood. And anyways, it was a clear latent threat saying, hey, you know what, if you don't start getting in line or you don't start being afraid, because again, this is what happens so often inside of Washington, D.C. And it's the reason why people get upset when you, in quote unquote, go out of line when you get elected, because they like people to become, county commissioners, then maybe a city councilman or vice versa, then a state rep, then a state senator, and then they'll run for Congress and they'll get there. But by the time they get there, they've been in politics for maybe 18, 20 years at this point. And so they've kind of been groomed of how things work. It's like, well, you got to listen to leadership. You got to stay in line. You got to, not make your donors mad. These are the big donors that really matter. These are the movers and shakers.
You spend so much time, or a member of Congress spends most of their time raising money, right? I mean, it's a lot.
That for most members of Congress, yes. Now, the names that the average American you could just go up to on the street and say, hey, can you name 10 members of Congress? Those people typically do not have to, because normally those people can rely on small dollar donors.
I'm not sure that many people can name 10 members of Congress. That'd be difficult for 90%.
Well, again, most of the notable names in Congress, those people can rely on small dollar donors so much that they are not so tied to doing phone time all the time. But for the majority of members of Congress, they have to go across the street to either whichever side of the aisle you're on. You have to go to your headquarters. You have to raise money, and then you're doing your call time. They have all these sheets for you to call and all this stuff. Because in politics, and it's something that I don't like. I think it should just be left up to really brutal debates and see who has the best ideas and who can fulfill on those ideas. But unfortunately, in politics, so much of your actual ammunition to fight those battles comes down to fundraising,
financial. And how much time did you spend fundraising?
Again, I was in a unique position because I had such a large social media reach, and it also led that, and then also I took a lot of fights, which most members of Congress don't take a lot of fights. And in hindsight, some people could say, well, maybe that wasn't good for you, but I got to stand for my ideals. When I was offered two different ways, saying, well, hey, if you take one of the party's preferred members of staff to kind of lead you through things, then you'll have a really easy time in Congress.
And you didn't take that option.
I did not.
What did you say when they offered that?
So it was a really late night in the Capitol. We were still going through orientation, and our orientation was truncated because of COVID. But I remember that I was called to a member of the leadership's office. I went in there, and then they were just saying, hey, we would love to know that you're a team player. And we would know that you're a team player.
Team player.
Yeah, well, hey, this story, it's got a great crescendo at the end.
Okay.
But they hand out kind of all of these amazing candidates for their chief of staff position. And what people need to realize, what your audience needs to realize, is that your staff is so much of your policy, because these bills are way too big for anybody to read. There's too much work for any one member of Congress to be able to do all of it. And so what your staff brings you, or what your staff actually types in to be put into the bills, is so much up to their discretion. So you really have to hire with an intention that these people are going to follow through on your actual vision for what's going to get done in the country. And so when they're offering you your chief of staff is in command of virtually everything that happens, from your scheduling all down to everything, unless it's a very involved member of Congress, which is very rare. And like I said, there's maybe only 40 or 60 of those. And so when they're trying to implant a chief of staff into my offices because that chief of staff would be able to control what information gets
Control
back to the
you,
member,
pretty much.
control me. And so I remember I sat there and, I'm a Southerner and I'm not going to be rude. I was just sitting there. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, I see that. And then, I started just kind of asking, I was like, what does it mean to be a team player? What are the benefits of being a team player? And they kind of started talking about, just in general, no specifics, but how, if there's bad media articles, they can help tame those. They can help keep those suppressed, that kind of thing. And I just remember I sat there, I looked at it, I was like, yeah, well, thank you so much for these options. And then as I was rolling out, I made sure that they could see me. And I just took the piece of paper and I set it in the trash can. And I just left.
When did they see you do that?
Oh, they absolutely saw me do that.
And what was their reaction to that?
The reaction became I lost my committee assignments, the ones that I was lobbying for.
You can't name the folks in the room, or you're not comfortable doing that?
I don't feel comfortable, no. And again, for so many of the things that happen inside of Washington, D.C., it's almost silly to shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
Because they answer to some bigger boss, someone higher up in leadership or some really big donor. And so it's oftentimes the people that are the curry the messages to one another inside of the House aren't actually the perpetrators of the incidents. And so it's almost silly to say, oh, well, this is the person that did it. So until you actually do what they're asking you to do, you don't know who the person trying to orchestrate the whole situation is.
So this happens, you put the thing in the dumpster with the trash, they see it, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, and so then I was lobbying for the, because NAFTA really destroyed so much of what we had in my old district, and it was a terrible trade deal for the United States as a whole, especially for our manufacturing. And so I really wanted to get on foreign affairs because I could have a hand in, crafting the upcoming trade deals to try and bring the jobs back that we had lost. And so I'm going through, you have to go through the steering committee while you're in orientation to be able to get.
What is that for those who aren't familiar with that?
So the steering committee is elected from the body of Republican congressmen. There's one for the Democrats as well. And that steering committee decides who gets put onto what committees. It's a very, very vitally important. So as soon as you finish your election, your general election, you then instantly have to go start another election in Washington, D.C. to try and get the steering committee to put you on committees that will make you be able to actually bring an impact and a difference to whatever your biggest campaign promises are. And so I really wanted foreign affairs. And then after I put that in the trash can, I think we went on a weekend. And then when we came back, I remember that I was brought in front of the steering committee. And this was it was between that day and the next day that the final decisions were going to be made for what committees the freshmen were going to get. And so I hadn't heard anything about me putting the thing in the trash can, and I had hired another chief of staff, someone that I imported, someone that I knew was going to be loyal to me and not to the uniparty. And wouldn't you know, their number one reaction as I went in, they said, hey, so we know that you're all set for foreign affairs. We were excited to have you, but unfortunately, and they said that it was because of AIPAC that they were not going to give me this. But I know for a fact that it's because I was not going to have their desired representative
because they were trying to say it was because of AIPAC?
Yeah.
In other words, you weren't supportive of them, or why would they say that?
I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people would call me a Nazi as I was going up. And again, for most people on the conservative right,
but that's just a pejorative.
It's just a pejorative that's used. They don't even know what a Nazi means. Most of that can't even define what fascism is. Yeah. And so, but anyway, so they said it was because of AIPAC that they weren't going to, because AIPAC wasn't a fan of mine, that they weren't going to let me be on foreign affairs. And I just think that coming in conjunction with instantly saying no and then hiring another chief of staff, someone who I knew would be loyal to me and not to the leadership, you would have to be absolutely blind, deaf, and dumb to not realize that those two things coincide.
Do you have a chief of staff in mind if you were to win?
I absolutely do.
You do, and it's probably hard to trust people. A man in your position, a man in my position, it's hard to trust people.
Well, James, you know what? You and I have both been through something very similar. When you are kicked down and you suffer a small defeat, and I know you agree with me that all defeat until death is merely mental. And so you and I both suffered some small defeats that, I think both made both of us better, wiser, shrewder men. But the one great asset you get from that is you get to realize the value of friendship, and you get to realize how few friends you actually have in this world. Because so many people, I think it's such an abused word to go around saying, oh, these are my friends, these are my friends. But I genuinely believe that, a very blessed man is lucky to have 3 friends. The majority of people have 1, maybe 2 friends.
How many do you have?
True. I have 3 friends that I know.
Roots.
Like the roots of the tree. Yeah, we're not talking branches and leaves.
Right,
we're talking the roots of the tree.
And are these people from your elementary school or high school or?
One is from one of my oldest friends in my life. Yeah, he's an amazing gunsmith in Western North Carolina. Another one is the one that I lovingly refer to as my brother. He's a great guy. And another one is one of the smartest men I've ever met in my life. But all of my friends, you know, I call them, you know, corner toters. You know, they if I was paralyzed in the time of Jesus, they would grab a corner of a mat and they would break through a fucking ceiling. I apologize. Break through a ceiling to get me down to Jesus because they knew I'd be able to walk again.
We're standing up to the powers that tried to discredit us, silence us, smear us, raid us, and throw us in jail. They've awakened a sleeping giant. We're building a movement of transparency and accountability in both the public and private sectors because we run from nothing. We hide from nothing. And when you join and get your full access pass, you fuel a movement for truth. We are the media now.
So you started January 2021. That's when you entered. When do Congress members get sworn in?
You get sworn in on the 3rd.
The 3rd of January,
Yes.
3 days before January 6th. And I
Correct.
remember seeing you that day. No, I just went to, there was they were giving speeches there on the green.
Yep.
And that was before everyone went over the Capitol. I went back to my hotel room. And I remember seeing you. I think you gave a speech
I
there.
spoke in the eclipse, yeah.
And the president spoke, you spoke. I forgot the other speakers. It was the eclipse.
Yeah, and so I was, you know, there weren't many members of Congress that actually spoke on January 6th. You know, we were in active debate, and so I was leading the debate on one of the states, and so I knew that I probably had 30 minutes, but, you know, there was no traffic getting around anywhere through D.C. But Pennsylvania Avenue was completely blocked off, and it's downhill from the Capitol.
remember that.
And I'm in a chair. So I just rolled down this entire long stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue, and, man, just seeing the enthusiasm and the pride of that crowd, just hearing, you know, it was a nonstop applause because like, that's one of our few fighters. That's one of the few people that's actually going to fight for us.
Yeah.
Actually, James, to tell you why I ruffled so many feathers very early on in Congress is because I remember it was actually the first time you and I met. It was, I believe, in Tampa for a Turning Point event. It was right at the end of 2020.
2020, yeah. Was it American Social or I forgot where we met? in Tampa.
I don't remember. I remember I'm meeting you there that day, and that was such a big deal.
Charlie
for me.
also had an event in 2021, so maybe it was the previous year. I don't recall exactly when, but I remember we were in the Ice Bar.
Yes, I remember.
Ice Bar, was that like Orlando or something like that? It was like an Ice Bar in Orlando where I got to go back to that. It was pretty cool.
But anyways, nobody was willing to contest the election at that point. And I mean, I think there had been one senator that said he would do it, and then there was one member of Congress, and that was it. And so then I, at this, you know, large Turning Point event, you know how large the events are. I had spoke to Charlie earlier, and him and I were texting back and forth for the next few days, and we had filmed a very long-form video, about 8 minutes, explaining why I was contesting the election. It wasn't leaning into any conspiracy theories, which have all now borne out to be true. If you didn't watch Dinesh D'Souza's on the Mules, all of these things that we thought had happened during the 2020 election actually did happen. But I didn't have that evidence at the time to be able to actually contest the election. But I did know that they broke the Constitution. So I released this really long-form video because I had tried calling other members of Congress who I had met and being like, hey, I hope you will contest the election with me. And I wasn't getting anywhere.
This was a video filmed by Turning Point?
No, a video filmed by me.
Filmed by you guys?
Because I realized something, that being such a young member of Congress gave me an avenue to be able to influence change that most members of Congress have never had up to this point. It was to be able to get your message out directly to the people. And then instead of you just calling and lobbying as a freshman member of Congress, who at the time I wasn't even sworn in, not for days later, I instead could just get hundreds of thousands of Americans from all of these people's districts to start blowing up their phones and make sure they're going to do it, and giving them the actual legal backing to say, oh, this actually makes sense. They broke the Constitution. And so when we released this video, then I spoke. I announced that I was going to contest the election. I got a call right beforehand, because Charlie had kind of told a few people, from so many people in the House, very, very powerful members of the House, people who have been there for almost as long as I've been alive, calling and just saying, do not do this. You can't do this. It's going to put us all in such a bad position, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, fortunately, I don't work for you. I work for my constituents. And that was such a foreign concept to these people. It became to come to find out. And now, looking back, I see why it's such a foreign concept to members of Congress, because they know that they can greatly affect your primary and your upcoming reelection. And so really, when people want to say that it was because of all the articles that came out about me that I lost my election, that bears absolutely no truth. I would never have lost my election if they didn't break the state constitution in North Carolina. They got the state house to circumvent the state constitution to then redraw my district after the census maps had already come out. And so they redrew my district in the middle of an election year after when you have already gotten your new district, the election previously. And so I had a ruby red, hardcore conservative district that just kind of basically cut all around Asheville, North Carolina, which is like the Portland of the East. But then after I became such a nuisance to these people, they released all these attack articles, shot every barrage they had at me. They realized I still wasn't going to lose.
What time period, what month and year was the attack articles coming out?
The attack articles really started coming out in 2022.
2022?
Yeah.
Like winter, spring, summer, or fall?
Winter, leading up to the primary in the spring.
22. And it seems to me, like listening to you talk, kind of what happened to me was that they want to get you out, and then they'll use whatever they can as a pretext.
They'll throw everything at you.
As a pretext.
Yes.
And then people, the sheep, might go, oh, that's the real reason.
That's the real reason. But in reality, we were still going to win by double digits. There was nothing they could do to stop us. And then at the 11th hour, they completely changed the voting district to where I now have an extremely moderate.
Who is in charge of changing that? Who has the power to change the voting district?
So that is the state house. That's going to go to
North Carolina
State House. But remember, as I told you, kind of the life cycle of a politician in America for the average politician, they stand in line for a very long time. They become a county commissioner, then they become a state house member. So
those people felt they were entitled to
exactly.
To this.
But then also people from Washington, D.C. are then going to the very powerful members of the state house saying, hey, we'll give you a really easy election for your next cycle. We can make this happen for you. We'll support you to run against him if you guys redraw his maps. And so that's what they did. And then I went from a hardcore Republican district to a moderate district. And you know how far right-leaning I am. Me running against moderates, it almost seems like I'm running against liberals to me. They're the exact same thing to me. And I hesitate to use the word liberal because I think words matter so much. But in the classical sense of liberals, that is not what the leftists are. The leftists are a demon-worshiping cult. Liberals believe in the free exchange of ideas.
Yeah, a classical liberal. We have a list of articles on the screen here. These are some of the attack examples. A little hard to see, but for us, but you can lean over there. Scandals are piling up. Scandals piling up. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Madison Cawthorn smear campaign. Madison Cawthorn concedes amid orgy of scandals. That's a play on words. And Madison Cawthorn's show is over. And we all did New York Times. If you haven't, I'm just going to say something for the audience. There's a book called Into the Buzzsaw. If you have not experienced this, I've been doing this for 21 years. I've been through this like generationally. I know what you're talking about. They build you up and then they tear you down. It's almost like the hero's journey. Jon Stewart talks about it too. For you, can you think back? Was there what was the lowest point, the nadir for you during that time?
So it actually came prior to the second election. It was during the first election. So I'm one of the only people, I believe Thomas Massey.
You mean before 2021?
Yes. Okay. So this was during 2020, that election cycle. So there was a 12-way primary for an open seat. Mark Meadows had left to be the chief of staff to the president. And anyways, the president had endorsed a lady in my district. Her name was Linda, really great woman. I would love for her to be in my Bible study. Everything's great about her, but she was not the warrior we needed for the times that we were going into and the times that we're in now. I think we need people with, fierce backbone that won't back down regardless of what people say. They can go into stadiums of hundreds of thousands of people who hate them and want to kill them and will not back down regardless because, as you say, my price is my life. And so anyways, but Trump had endorsed this woman, and Trump never loses a Republican primary, so he'd only lost to Thomas Massey. And anyway, so I'm going against this Trump-endorsed, everyone in the game had endorsed her. She had millions of dollars coming in from outside money, tons of donors, access to the entire MAGA donor base. And the reason I beat her was because I was more MAGA than she was, and I was better at articulating, the MAGA positions and being conservative and being an American. And so, anyways, I beat her, and then I get a call from the president on the way back, and I've shared this before, so I don't mind sharing the president and I's conversation. He says, "Madison, you even beat my ass. It was incredible, blah blah." And once I saw a picture of you,
Madison, you beat my ass. It was the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, he was great, and then he invited me to the White House, and then after he met me at the White House, he asked me to speak at the RNC, which that was the most life-changing.
So he was
thing.
Impressed that you overcame all this.
Yeah, and especially because of the fact that I didn't beat him because I was attacking him. I
went right to the populism, right?
Yeah, I went to the populism. I did exactly how he did. And, and just also because of the fact that, sir, I know you could have thrown your punches way harder. I know that you didn't, and I appreciate that. And, I think he understood that I understood the power dynamic there, and that, I'm always been a big fan, is one of his biggest supporters. And so then he invites me to speak at the RNC, and just life is going amazing. But at the same time, the liberals are trying to spin this as, oh, Donald Trump's losing power with the MAGA base. And so then they invited me to go on The View. I go on The View, and I expect a dogfight with these people, and then they're all just trying to sing my praises. And then once they realize that I'm a hardcore Trumper, they're like, oh, never mind, we have to go to commercial break. And so I'm getting love from both sides of the media. The entire zeitgeist of the media was that, oh, Madison's the new face of the Republican Party. Everything's great.
So they're trying to use this as a cudgel against Trump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the conservative media is loving me as well because I'm this new young face, and I'm doing some great things. And so, but then once it kind of gets out how far to the right I am, how conservative I am, that I do still support the president, even though he endorsed against me, because I've got the guy's back. He's a loyal guy. I'm a loyal guy. As we're moving forward, then I believe it was in July. I think it was early July. Every single 2 days for about the next 3 weeks, I got in a brutal attack article. And if it's not something that was true or exaggerated or something that was misrepresented, then it was a complete barefaced lie from anonymous sources just trying to destroy my life, destroy my reputation, all these things.
What were some of those attacks?
Oh, that one that I was murdering kittens as a child, one that I was a Nazi, one that I believe that, we should, if you're not a Christian, you should be killed. Just all these.
I think I vaguely remember this.
Yeah.
Because you're this fresh-faced young man, and they have to, it's like a tabula rasa, blank slate. So they have to put something.
They got to make it bad. They got to make it bad. But anyways, as they're launching this massive attack, again, I was unchecked to challenges in this way. Because, the only challenge I had been through up to that point in my life, I had a charmed childhood, was the fact that I had nearly lost my life. I had lost the ability to use my body. I'd been through a lot of hard times with that. But then when I have people that I've known for 20 years of my life, my family's friends, all of these people, when they start being like, wow, your child's a really evil person. That's awful. Wow, I can't believe you did this. And I'm like, you've known me my entire life.
Those
you know
are
I'm
not your
that
friends.
Person. Those are not your friends. Those are not your friends. As you learn quickly. And so it was at that point that I think I hit probably my lowest point. And I remember
before you were elected.
Before I was elected, yeah. And then I remember, because, as someone who's new to this world, words still mean things to you. They, what someone calls you means a lot to you, because what you call someone means a lot to yourself. And then you realize that this is all a game they play, and they don't actually care. They just want to use whatever's effective.
But it still hurts.
It still hurts deeply.
Did you have a nasty Wikipedia page at the time?
Oh, I still do. My Wikipedia page is one of the only pages that to this day remains locked. And it was written
It's still locked.
It was written, if you go look at the author of it, the main contributing author for it was the opposition research used by my Democratic opponent for that cycle.
I think people have become wise to how absurd it is. But so when I was 25, when I was your age, when I was 25, I'm 10 years older than you. I remember my Wikipedia page was so horrible that it evoked like gasps from the people who read it. It's like he doctors all the videos, and it has like 18 citations. It's locked. That was, honest to God, that was probably my Wikipedia page is probably the hardest thing for me. The Wikipedia page.
In so many ways, it's your first impression. Because say you're going somewhere, you're a notable name. People are like, my friend James O'Keefe is joining us, and then people will Google you in the meantime when they're using the bathroom, and then you go in and you just notice these people. They already have this preconceived notion, even though they didn't know you beforehand. And so I'll tell you what happened though. I went and I rented a jet ski down in Florida, and I pointed it towards the sun, and I made sure it was on a full tank, and I was there to write my RNC speech, and I just floored it. I just floored it directly into the sunset, and I waited until I got all the way down to half a tank. And James, I wept, and it wasn't pretty crying. I was weeping. I'm deeply convicted by my faith. I have a great relationship with the Lord, and I was just screaming out to him, like, how could you let this happen? I'm trying to do everything I can for you. And I was broken. I mean, I was genuinely broken. And it wasn't an audible voice, but I heard more clearly than I've ever heard God speak to me before. It doesn't matter what they call you, because they're not the ones that called you. Meaning that it's God that called you to this position. And from that point on, I've been like adamantium. Whatever they call me doesn't matter to me. I've seen what these people cheer for. Their boos mean nothing to me. I have no love for them. They hate everything that I believe in. And then when they want to start saying the things that I think that they say, oh, well, this is what he believes in. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I believe in. I believe that we're supposed to have hegemony over the world. I believe that America is here to lead the way. And if you want to be in the way of that, then you're wrong. I'm here to look out for Americans and Americans' interests only. And so when they want to try and attack me for things that they think are going to play well with their base, it plays incredibly well with my friends because that's exactly what we believe.
But those media articles attacking you for killing kittens and all this bullshit, I mean, that hurts. That just hurt. And I think people need to understand you're a human being, and
Right.
and if you lose your ability to feel, that you don't want to lose your soul.
No,
You
and when you stare into the abyss, you either get sucked into it and you become so hurt that you become jaded and fierce, and that you have no empathy for anything left because your empathy was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think losing your naivete, although it's very painful and sad, it can be a good thing as long as you come back. As long as you're able to get back.
Well, being
to who you
naive,
are.
as Jordan Peterson reminds us, is being naive is not good.
No, it's not good.
Not good.
But losing yourself and giving yourself over to the monster to fight the monster they're sending at you.
You don't want to become them.
No. You want to be able to have the sword. And again, I'm stealing a lot of thoughts here from Jordan Peterson, but you want to have the sword. You want to know how to use it, and you want them to fear you using that sword. But you don't want to become a monster. Those are that's what I think true masculinity lies.
And I think they may want you to become that. Like when they came in your office and you put the thing in the dumpster, they want you to be them because you're a young tabula rasa. So you're on the jet ski, you're going towards the sun, you're weeping, you're hearing God talk to you.
Yep.
And at that point you find peace, and
then
the
I find
attacks
peace,
no longer
and
matter.
then the attacks no longer matter. And then also, again, one of the great benefits of going through massive controversy in your life is you truly figure out who your friends are. My friends to this day, they wouldn't turn their back on me for anything. They would stick by my side.
What did they think about
no matter
these
what.
crazy articles?
Well, I lost a lot of people that I thought were friends at the time.
The real people, the
real
the three people.
I mean, just instant, vehement anger. Just knowing that it's evil and it's wrong and it's lies from the pit of hell. And those are the people that are worth fighting.
So they were
for.
angry.
Oh, they were furious.
Yeah.
And again, we're Southerners. My friends wanted to go fight. They were like, "Oh, you want to talk shit about our friend, my brother, my son?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's see if you can fight." And then, but obviously, that's obviously you got to temper the worst.
I mean, they
impulses.
would certainly win. The
100%.
deep state is not broad-shouldered.
They are not. We in the South we call those pencil necks.
Yeah, they're pencil necks. They're chatty gays. They're feminine individuals. I know this because I go undercover and I meet them, and I mean, I'm telling you, it's not the caricature that you think. So I don't think they stand a chance. But I mean, for me, with Project Veritas, I've talked about this extensively, and this show is not about me, but anecdotally, because I'm listening to you, and I think even my parents, like my dad's like one of my best friends, and he took it harder than I did.
That is a rare thing.
He took it. Yeah, my father took it. I think anytime a parent, I saw the Charlie Kirk Medal of Freedom, and I did see an image of his parents, and I was like, oh man. I mean, your parents take it harder. Your friends, your best friends, take it harder. That's what I hear from what you're saying. That they watched what happened to you, and they were like, man, they were angry. My father was furious. And my parents watched me get raided by the FBI, get arrested, house arrest, 50 lawsuits, and 100-hour work weeks, and then removed from my own creation. And that was like, they were like my best friends through it. But that's certainly, and then after this happened to you, so you go through this, you have this moment on the jet ski, and then what happens?
And then I come back, and I haven't looked back since.
I haven't looked back.
No, I realize that I'm just on a mission set out by God. Whether it's a successful mission or not a successful mission, it lies in, duty is ours and the results are God's. That's what I think everyone needs to understand.
Praise if it depends on us. Work as if it depends on us. Praise if it depends on God.
That's exactly correct.
Morton Blackwell.
That's exactly correct.
And then 2021, 2022, and you haven't looked. So what did you do between leaving Congress and now?
So I quickly moved to Florida, moved down to Naples. I had visited Byron when he asked me to come down for an event while we were both in Congress. Asked me to go speak at a grocery store. And I was like, well, Byron, I love you, and I'm not being arrogant, but I'm not going
Seed to table.
I'm not going to fly 4 hours to speak at a grocery store. But then I found out what that grocery store really is, and it's the reason why.
Is it seed to table?
The seed to table, absolutely.
Most amazing place I've ever been in
The
my
most
life.
amazing place. If you, I'm serious. I know it sounds
I'm not
crazy.
being paid to say this, by the way.
And I know it sounds crazy to say this, but if you are looking to travel for something that you have never experienced before in your life, come to Naples, Florida, and go to Seed to Table.
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
Alfie Oakes did not pay me to say this.
No.
I know the man.
And he's a
but
great man. He's a great, really one hell of a hog hunter.
I've spoken there too. He hunts hogs. I didn't know.
Oh, he
that.
does. Yeah.
But it blows Whole Foods out of the water. Incredible.
It's not even apples. That's apples to oranges.
And there's a governor's race in Florida. Forgive my ignorance. I haven't been following it, but it's Donald's. What's the status?
Byron Donalds is running. He's endorsed by the president. He's raised tens of millions of dollars. He's the odds-on favorite to win by wide margins.
Who's he running against him?
There's going to be some Democrat competitor, but they won't stand a chance. And then right now there's some just some behind the scenes
drama,
angling of people
I've heard
trying
some
to
of
get in the
those
race.
things. I won't even say because I haven't confirmed. But there's all types of what is going on with that? Can you talk about that? Why is that just political competition or?
There could be political competition. Also, there are two large factions in the Republican Party, as I'm sure you're well aware. There's kind of the more neocon who wants to just kind of keep things status quo because it's been working for them for a long time. And then there's also kind of this new populist base who's, very Christian, very nationalist, loves everything we believe in. And right now they're kind of at war, and I think a lot of those people saw an opportunity with Governor DeSantis, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Governor DeSantis and everything he's done for our state. They saw an opportunity to pit him against President Trump, thinking that he would be taken down by the deep state or assassinated or whatever they thought. So they wanted to pit those two against each other. And now they kind of realize that Florida's become such a beacon for the direction the country needs to go in for as far as the conservative base goes. I think they now see another opportunity to try and snub, a future populist leader, Byron Donalds, and just kill his career before it really takes shape, and as he'll do when he becomes governor. But I'm extraordinarily confident, I'll just say this for the record, that he will win this race. I have no doubt in my mind.
Is he won the primary? Is there a primary?
There's a primary going on. Yeah, it doesn't happen until August 18th. That's kind of where the murmurs are coming around.
Okay.
Some people say it might be Casey DeSantis. Some people might say it could be some other big names that might just live in the area. But I'll tell you, I've never confirmed that with the governor's team or with the governor himself, and so I hesitate to speak on it. But I will just say it is a mistake to go against Byron Donalds. One of the only few people that can just smoke me in a debate. I would, if you ever have to debate Byron Donalds, it's not a good idea.
What's the reason you moved to Florida?
So one, from a practical standpoint, everything's flat down here. Me being in a wheelchair, I love that everything on the water's got hand controls. That just makes things much easier. Growing up in the mountains was great, but you can't fish in streams when you can't walk. That's just a fact.
Do you ever go up? Can you go up trails? Is there a possibility for you to do that? Is there a certain type of wheelchair?
Depending on the kind of trails they are. The ones that growing up in the mountains, your base level of adrenaline is so much higher than anybody else's, and so to really feel the joy of going hiking and being out in nature and feeling like you're trying to, really contend with nature, it's got to be such a difficult trail. It's not something I would ever attempt or be able to do in a wheelchair. Yeah. But then also, the people here in Florida are phenomenal. They make life great, because in North Carolina, it's such a purple state. When I was going to a grocery store, I know you know what I'm talking about. But sometimes when someone looks at you in an aisle, you're like, oh, that person knows who I am. And then in North Carolina, it's like, are they going to come call me a Nazi or are they going to ask for a picture?
But the people who didn't like you, they said something? Because in my case, they just give me a weird look and walk away.
Normally it's the weird look, but I found when they're in numbers, they'll say things.
Really?
Yes. When they're in numbers, they'll say
North
things.
Carolina to you?
Oh, just, hey, you're a Nazi, you hate this country, like you're a traitor, you should be killed, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's just, but they're cowards. You just push back one little bit and they all flee like cowards.
So it was the flatness of Florida and the people.
The people. Yeah. The people is the main selling point.
Do you miss North Carolina?
I miss being around my family. Yeah, I've got 4 little nieces, and my brother is a great father, and his wife is excellent.
Are they going to get your parents to move here or your family to move here?
You know what? There's no plans to do that right now. No, my brother and my father both have a business in North Carolina. They're doing well. So,
what do your parents think about what you've been through?
Oh, well, I very similar to your parents. I'm very close to both of my parents. My father is someone I look up to a lot. My mom is probably the most responsible for who I am. She homeschooled me my entire life. And so for them to see me go through so much trial in difficulty when I'm just trying to do what I think is right. It's very difficult for them. But, they also raised me for this life. They raised me not to be a politician, but they raised me to do what is right regardless of the cost. And so, do I think Mary enjoyed watching Jesus get crucified? No. But is that what they know that I'm called to do? 100%.
If you look at the way you are right now versus when you were 25, I remember a moment, I don't know if we have the video. I didn't ask my team to pull this, but what I remember from you is turning point. See, it all goes back to Charlie Kirk. We have so much in common with Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk held an event, I want to say December of 2020, here in Palm Beach at the convention center.
Yes.
And I just have this vivid, I was wearing a Project Veritas leather jacket, and I just have this vivid memory of you in your wheelchair on stage, pyrotechnics, the young 19 and 21-year-old kids were going nuts. And you're just on, I just remember that moment of you at the Palm Beach Convention Center, December 22. Do you remember that?
Absolutely. That's when I announced that I was contesting the election.
That's when you announced 2020, December 2020. I remember that. And I just remember looking at you. This is almost exactly 5 years ago. I remember thinking, wow, he's on top of the world. If you look at who Madison Cawthorn is right here versus the man from December 2025, what's the biggest difference in you?
I hesitate to ever call myself wise, so I'm not saying that I am wise, but I think I've gained a significant amount of wisdom in that time. I've learned, I've become more articulate. I've become, as I'm sure, any young man does, you're filled with far more ferocity and aggression than you get in your later years. And so, that was only 6 years ago for me when I was down here, but 5 years. But going through the battles that I've gone through, I realize what it takes to win fights. And I realize that there are oftentimes wiser ways to fight. Doesn't mean that I would take different fights. It would just mean that I would fight them in a much more shrewd manner. Shrewd. Yeah, because so many people in the conservative right, they always quote the verse, we're supposed to be innocent as doves, innocent as doves, innocent as doves. And so many people say that. But that is a massive detriment if you don't say the whole verse in context. Innocent as doves, but shrewd as snakes. Like, we are not called to be doormats. We are called to be very shrewd, very masculine, very strong, and not being willing to, Christianity is not a weak religion, and being an American, we are not descended from fearful men, and we should not act like it, and we should stand up and fight regardless of the cost it goes for us. Because again, our cost is our life. If you want to buy us, or you want us to get us to stop going after what is right.
That's a bold statement. Not everyone can say that. We have the video, team. Throw it on the screen for the audience. This is you. Look at this. This is the moment they found it. I just remember this. This is here in Palm Beach.
Yep.
That's Madison. That's Benny Johnson.
Yep.
Madison. You look like you put on some muscle since then.
Well, you know what? When you realize the demons were fighting, you want to be able to beat them in a fight if it comes to it.
There it is. All right, good. So, yeah, I guess also when you're going through that stress, you got to keep your calorie intake up. It's hard. You lose weight. Weight fluctuates, right?
Weight fluctuates a lot, yeah. And then, also just any kind of exercise is such a great outlet for whatever you're feeling.
If you can build it into your schedule.
Exactly. That's the hard part.
That's the moment. I just remember, that was just so electric. And I'm not just saying that to be a fanboy. That was a moment. And I think I hear you on being more shrewd. This is James O'Keefe. You know me for exposing the truth and holding the corrupt elite responsible and accountable. However, today I want to tell you about protecting your own freedom, your finances. Before you buy any gold or silver, hear this. We're going through one of the biggest financial shifts of our lifetime. De-dollarization. Nations like China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia are pulling away from the US dollar. And that threatens your savings and retirement security. Legendary investor Ray Dalio warns skyrocketing debt, relentless money printing, and a weakening dollar are all part of a dangerous cycle that could impact you. That's why more Americans are turning to real assets like physical gold and silver. Gold just surged past $3,700 per ounce, and momentum is building. I've partnered with veteran-owned American Independence Gold to help you take action.
Open a qualifying account today and get up to $10,000 in bonus gold and our free gold protection guide. And here's the best part. A portion of every sale supports Tunnel to Towers and Wounded Warriors. Freedom isn't given, it's secured. This is James O'Keefe. As always, this is not financial advice. Always check with your licensed financial advisor before you invest.
There's this book that I keep citing by Charles Murray called We the People, and he says that Congress is in a state of such sclerosis, legislative sclerosis, where solutions are kind of beyond the political process. Things are just so insanely broken. So as someone whose price you say is your life, and you're courageous and you're an idealist, how do you even get anything done in Congress? Is kind of my question.
So I think from the traditional manner that it's what people say could be correct, that Congress is past repair. I'm eternally an optimist. I think that, it just is a big predicate on being successful as being an optimist. But I will say that we are given different tools in every different age. And in this age, we have the ability to get messages out to millions and millions and millions of people without having to rely on mainstream media, without having to rely on having a multi-million-dollar organization to do so. And so I think in Congress, you kind of have a twofold responsibility. One is to vote well for your constituents and return, their tax dollars back to them and make sure that their country is working for them and that their voice is heard in Congress. But two is to just also recognize the battlefield we're on. A generational problem is not going to be fixed by a single person in one generation. If it's been going on for generations, it's most likely going to take generations to fix. And, I credit Charlie Kirk the most for this, but I think being a movement leader, inciting a spirit of rebellion. And again, I don't mean rebellion in the kinetic sense, but I mean rebellion in the hearts and minds of young people around this country, to realize that I don't have to put up with your shit anymore. The world that you have handed me is broken and destroyed and does not work for me. And I don't have to just sit here and smile and say, thank you so much for that. No, I can destroy the things you built and I can build a better country for the next generation. Mm-hmm. And does that mean that we're going to face all happy times? No, it probably means we're going to face significantly darker times than we're facing right now. But I think that if we're capable of messaging in such a way that it captivates the hearts and minds and the courage of people all around this country, then I think in 60 years, the country could look incredibly different. The world could look incredibly different.
Well, that's all true in terms of the platform that you have, being a public figure, having social media. I saw a clip of you went viral in the stadium, MetLife Stadium. I forgot what that was about, but there was a young man that you were talking to.
Yeah, there's a young man. He's got
the police officer.
He's a Secret Service agent, an honorary Secret Service agent. He's got a terminal disease. And he took a moment.
He's terminal disease.
Terminal, yeah. And he decided to time a shoot.
You guys were praying together.
Yes, we prayed together.
And I hear you on the platform, but just the Congress itself is just, being an idealist and being a man of integrity. How do you reconcile that in a legislative body that's a little bit dysfunctional?
I would say that being an idealist and being a man of integrity are not, don't take away from your ability in Congress. I think that those things actually can give you a driving force to go out and win. Would we say that when the Muslim hordes were invading Vienna, and if they destroyed it, they would have destroyed, the infancy of Christianity in Europe? Were those people being idealists, especially when the Hussars came in and were able to save Vienna from certain demise? I think that was in 9/11 about 1,000 years ago. No, I think those people having such wherewithal and such sureness that what they're doing is right, just, and righteous, I think that gave them the ability to fight on regardless of what the odds looked like, regardless of how many people there were up against them. And so that's the one thing that I love showing people inside of Washington, D.C. When you go into the rotunda, if you look around it, the best thing to look for is the Wright brothers flying a plane in North Carolina. Then go one picture over, and it's this gigantic 360-degree just masterpiece. And it tells the story of America until we take our place in the skies.
I have not seen that. I've never been.
When we go, I will show you next time.
I would love to.
I'll walk you through the
when
entire.
You win.
When I win, yes. Yes, we will, for sure.
I'd love to see that.
But once you get there, once we get up to the point of the revolution, I always point out to any of my guests that are there, do you see how many redcoats there are lined up against the Patriots? And they say, yeah, well, I guess so, sure. And I'm like, do you know the reason for that is? And they're like, why? It's because only 3% of Americans stood against the greatest empire the world had ever known at that time. And if 3% of Americans, with the weapons that they had at their disposal, could beat the greatest empire the world had ever known at that time, to then become the greatest empire the world's ever known, I'm certain that we can. When we have this incredible country that is filled with nothing but promise and with opportunity, when we have social media at our disposal, when we have the shrewdness to know everything that's going on at almost all hours of the day because of great journalists like you and other people like that, I think we genuinely have the ability to beat these people and beat them resoundingly, and for it to go down for generations as this is the second revolution for America, when we freed ourselves of the shackles of this enslavement they put us under.
Well, I admire your optimism. And
it's not optimism. I think it's going to be really, really hard. I think it's going to be very difficult.
It's going to be challenging. I think
dark days are definitely ahead of us.
Dark days, and maybe simultaneously, I oscillate between hope and despair. But some dark times certainly, and the economics. I think, was it Tucker someone who said that that people can't afford to buy a house. Like, I can barely afford to buy a house. I mean, nobody can afford anything anymore.
That's when you know the system's not working for people.
Yeah, it's a serious problem for our generation,
right?
And people in their 30s. Who in Congress? Name some people that you admire, members of Congress.
I like Jim Jordan's ability to operate inside of Congress. I like Byron Donalds. He's probably one of my favorites. I really enjoyed Matt Gaetz while he was there. I have a lot of respect for Lisa McClain. Love Tim Burchett. There's so many, and so many of the greats, unfortunately, cycle out of Congress quickly because they're just destined for such great things, whether they're going to become a senator or a governor. And a lot of people I got elected with are now running for Senate or for governor. And so there are a lot of people. In Alabama, they're about to get another really incredible senator. And so there's a lot of great people. I didn't serve with him, but I really like Wesley Hunt. I think he's doing well. I haven't seen his voting record, but based on
Wesley Hunt, where's he?
Texas.
Yeah,
but if he votes the way he speaks, I'm sure he does an incredible job.
Now, Jim Jordan, team, if you want to pull up that FBI affidavit, those 3 screenshots of the redactions, and while my team is doing that, how did you meet Charlie Kirk?
So it was during my first election. He was in Charleston, South Carolina. And anyway, somebody told me about him and said, hey, he'll meet with you if you'll go see him. And so I drove down, I met with him, and
2019, 2020?
This was 2020, very early 2020. And so as we got to know one another, we just created kind of at first it was a texting relationship. And just, I went back after he was killed and read through every single one of our text messages, just realizing the mind he had, the forward thinking he had. It was incredible. And it's because of guys like that I genuinely believe that we are going to save this country. Because when you see the actual infrastructure that he was able to build in only 32 years, imagine what you and I can do in another 30 years building upon what he's already done.
You know what? I was talking to a friend of mine, a financial supporter, and I was complaining. We'll get to this in a moment, but I was complaining, I don't have any time. There's no time. I know you must feel that sometimes there's just so much to do. And she said, stop saying that. You have all the time in the world. Who doesn't have any more time is Charlie Kirk. So, James, you got another 40, 50 years. Get to work. So I like that.
Wow.
I like that perspective. But what do you think what is your take on how he was able to do that? Was it his work ethic? The gifts of Charlie Kirk?
It was his work ethic. I think there's a lot of people who work hard in the movement. I think there's a lot of people who work hard all over the country. I also think it was a uniquely gifted mind, a once-in-a-generation talent to, really see things for the way they are and be uncompromising in his beliefs, but still be able to affect massive amounts of change. And then when you see the actual level of sophistication and organization he brought to the conservative movement, that's what gives me a lot of hope. Is because before we had all these great ideals, just watching Republicans for the last 6 decades, it was like watching people run around with chickens with their head cut off. Oh, well, I'm going to say the right thing and maybe it's going to get something done. It's like, no, we're fighting true evil incarnate. You're not going to win this by just, hoping you do. You're going to win this by devising a strategy and executing it with ruthless precision. And that's the only way to do it.
Yeah, he lifted me up a lot. I mean, how did he help you? How did Charlie help you?
One, I mean, both as a personal friend, you know, someone who was just willing to encourage me, whether it was morally, my walk with God, just decisions I was facing, but then also just massive amounts of encouragement for what we were doing in Congress. Because, you know, when you're in Congress and you're fighting for the people and you're going against the status quo, it's a very lonely place. I will tell you that. But, you know, thankfully, for people that you can always tell basically how somebody feels about Washington, D.C. based on how much time they spend there. As soon as my votes were done, I was gone. And then I was out in the normal America. And then I had just tons of everybody. Everyone I knew was like, oh, hey, thanks for everything you're doing. It's great to see you up there. But then you go back into the swamp, and whether it's people from K Street, you know, special interest groups, or if it's, you know, other members of Congress, they don't like it. And so getting that perspective of how everyday Americans are still living and what they're looking for, that's what gives you the courage.
I know that, Madison, you were on the floor of the House. I don't know if we have the video of this, but you were talking about how the FBI raided me. I remember that you said something to the effect of, dead in the night, they came with guns pointed at James O'Keefe. Now, what happened since you said that was this year, they dropped the case. They just dropped it. The Southern District of New York just dropped the case against me. And when you drop a criminal probe, you get to see the affidavit. The affidavit contains the probable cause they brought to the magistrate judge in New York. And I was very excited about this. And we have a copy of the affidavit. I will bring this up every week, each week, until this changes. Every single word of this probable cause has been redacted. I mean, every word. There's 3 pages. In the bottom of page 45, there you see it. This is the only thing not redacted. Is a footnote written by an FBI agent. It says, quote, based upon my training and experience, I have learned, among other things, that cell phones are capable of sending emails, like the aforementioned emails. That's a really great little item from the FBI. So
now, James, I know you know this, but if I can interject for your audience who may be unaware, the only reason the FBI would be doing this is if they, you know, were really violating your First Amendment rights as a member of the press, and they were protecting assets they had within your organization. That's my take on it.
That's what an anonymous source, I cannot disclose who, in the White House told me when I inquired, because this is so unusual.
That's ridiculous.
This is highly unprecedented, highly unusual. Usually there's one word, but they said there were moles at Project Veritas. And my take, I wanted to get your take on this, and I want to talk about your accident, and then we've got 20 minutes left. My take is that the FBI's whole raison d'etre, core function, is to protect their sources and methods. That's kind of what they do. So they can't be transparent because they would be giving up the very thing they have to protect. Is that how you see it, or do you see it any different?
Again, when we were talking about earlier about kind of the unelected bureaucratic class, you know, it's supposed to be that our agencies report to the political appointees, and that's how things go. But there's so much institutional knowledge and institutional motivations that exist even beyond what the political appointees want or are aware of. This is completely a purpose to preserve their resources. Now, it's probably because these people have a fantastic cover. You know, if they're going to go to other conservative media outlets and be like, yeah, man, well, I worked at Project Veritas when they nuked James O'Keefe. I want to work for another great conservative news outlet, and I want to be able to help you. But really, they're not. They're just trying to maintain their cover so they can go out and do the exact same thing that they did to you.
So FBI informants or moles, FBI
informants. And listen, James, and this is, again, I'm not blowing smoke up you. I know you're not an arrogant man. But knowing the level of impact that you've had on massive organizations in this country, whether they're non-governmental or they're governmental, I would not be surprised to learn the FBI had an actual handler on staff inside of Project Veritas. You know, someone who is...
It's probably true.
And when we say a handler, it's someone who's there to both manage assets they've already turned and to turn others.
Now, some of those assets may not know. There's like useful idiots, there's cutouts. So it's very complicated how this all works.
And so, but again, you know, it gets the reason why most of the JFK files were so, you know, redacted and, you know, held under embargo for so long. It's not because they were protecting any individual person. It happened so long ago, decades and decades and decades. Everyone who was involved would have already been dead. Mm-hmm. The reason is because they're trying to protect the agency itself. And that is what I'm certain you're facing. And if I had to, I mean, this is a massive constitutional violation. The fact that there is not a Supreme Court case going on about you for them taking your
There may
laptop.
be it takes a while for that
It does
to
take
go
time
through the
to
courts.
percolate,
We're
but-
in the process of suing to get that. You mentioned that's a very profound, astute statement you just made. Protect the agency. What do you mean by that when it comes to JFK?
And again, I can't give any credible foundation for this, but I think it was very telling when the CIA released their new logo. I think this was a couple years ago, and it didn't involve the United States whatsoever. I think the CIA views themselves as their own government. I genuinely do, and I know that every president puts their new CIA directors in position. But again, after questioning so many political appointees during my time in Congress, I realized that so much of what happens inside of these executive agencies is unbeknownst
there
to
it
these
is.
people.
Is that their new
Yep,
logo?
that's the new logo.
When was this? When did this happen?
Oh, it had to be about 2 years ago. It was under the Biden administration.
I'm learning this right now. I didn't know that. That's ridiculous.
But it's my mind that the CIA, the intelligence community as a whole, really doesn't believe it's part of the United States government. They believe the United States government's a part of them.
Have you ever had any run-ins with the IC community that you know about?
I
Obviously,
have.
You have?
Yeah, I'm not willing to go into those yet, but
they've come after you in some way or tried to.
I have indeed. Yeah,
Well,
I had
one day will we find out about that one day?
We absolutely will,
Okay.
and hopefully everyone will find their names at the same time.
I mean, do you believe that the CIA killed JFK?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, was it the CIA or was it a conglomeration of? Because you start looking at the history of what was going on right after the time that he was assassinated. It points to some dangerous culprits. And I'll leave that. Just hop on Google and people can figure that out.
It's crazy it's become like a cliche throughout our life, but when you actually stop and think that our own government did that, and you actually read about it, it's dark.
Well,
it's
we
dark.
talk about shadow governments all the time, and the globalists and those kind of people. I think the globalists, whether they're militarization arm or they themselves are just a part of these global intelligence networks. That's what I really think is the movers and shakers behind so much of what happens in the world. And when someone is a direct threat to that, someone who is such an outspoken, well-delivering, and tactful, populist like JFK, they obviously have to kill this person. There's no option. First, they try to buy you. Then they try to prosecute you and scare you. And normally the prosecutions is something I faced in most of my time in Congress, and then even after Congress. These prosecutions are intended to drain you of your resources. And so, if you don't have the money to fight, then they just get to beat you for free. If you do have the money to fight, then it's going to require so much of your resources that then you have to go outside of what you're normally trying to accomplish to then go make money.
Yes.
In my case, I had to go, start businesses and make successful businesses to be able to fight off these legal battles. They tried to kick me off the ballot based on an insurrection clause. I was so curious why they continue to throw around the word insurrection. It's like, maybe it's just a catchy word, but it's not even the most, incendiary one that I could see. But then I realized, Mark Elias has a long-term plan here. Mark Elias, for the audience here, it's kind of the Lawfare arm of the Democratic Party. But then Mark Elias started trying to kick off conservative members of Congress from being able to run for office again based on a Civil War doctrine.
I mean, it's very, very interesting that the amount of money that I've had to raise to pay lawyers
I have no doubt.
And Charlie said this in one of his last podcasts. He said, your nights, your weekends, gone. You've been in airplanes. You know how it is. Like, how many times have we been on airplanes? I mean, 100 to 150 airplane rides a year. Something happens to your body when you're on the plane. I think Charlie got sick.
It really does.
Just doing journalism, but also raising money to indemnify my reporters, not because it's good for my health, but because it's the right thing to do. And it's a denial of service attack against you when they do this.
That's the way to say it. Yes.
DOS attack. They're sucking up a percent. Now, I always thought of it as the cost of doing business, much like rent or utilities or any other liabilities in the cost of business. It's just the cost.
But
so
think about how insane that is. It's the cost of doing business to defend yourself from your own federal government.
Veritas, it was $5 million a year, 5 to 6 out of $20 million budget, so a quarter to a third of my resources. And you know what the crazy part about it is? The lawyers become rich. So the more corruption there is, the more money the lawyers make.
That's exactly. I mean,
it's
different. I think my most expensive case was $850,000. I think
that's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I think trying to fight against them trying to kick me off the ballot was $700,000. And
this is 501c or PAC money or C3
no,
money
it's
or
personal.
It's just non-tax deductible money.
Non-tax deductible money. You have to
Small
fight it.
dollar donors with
No,
combined-
this is personal money.
This is your money.
Yeah.
Your personal money.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I'm running a campaign at the same time I was fighting most of these attacks off. The only way to do it is to raise them. And if you have a donor base strong enough to be able to win your elections and fight your legal battles at the same time, that's great. But oftentimes you don't have
I mean, even Trump, can barely, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's a whole other subject. But people always say to me,
denial of service attack.
Denial of service. I attribute that to Lara Logan. She mentioned that.
It's just like a DDoS attack.
I am faced with that. And by the grace of God, it consumes about 1/3. Maybe 1/4 to 1/3 of my resources, time, talent, and treasure to be. Now, what I do is I make videos about the lawsuits. I make a case out of that. That's the only thing I can do. I'm fortunate, but it's not easy. It's probably.
But imagine how many good-hearted men and women that scares off from doing the right thing.
And they don't have a platform. They don't have 1 million YouTube subscribers.
No, and so when they see you going up against, it's like, well, gosh, I mean, of course he can do it because he's got this
barely.
Yeah, which is
barely. Sometimes we, barely making payroll.
And they've got children, and they've got wives, and they've got jobs, and they can't split their time like that.
And the really sad reality is the American Bar Association, the attorneys, they're making all this money, $1,000 an hour, and that's the going rate. People say find free lawyers. Well, you get what you pay for. So that's a whole other subject. But I think people always say, James O'Keefe, they say, are you afraid of the violence, especially after Charlie Kirk? And that was a paradigm shift for me. I never, first of all, I'm not a very afraid person. I don't think you of that way either. I'm not a scaredy cat. I'm not worried about death all the time. A lot of people are. But to me, it seems like the thing that I actually do, fear is the wrong word, a danger is the legal jeopardy, or is the lawsuits, is the jurisprudence against me. That's how I see it.
Because, well, I mean, I think that would be worse than death. You know, if they were to be successful in locking you up or successful in destroying all of your resources to where you couldn't fight.
Yeah.
And then, again, everyone sounds right until the cross-examination. The people are just going to see the headlines and be like, oh, he did get arrested. Yeah, he was wrong. And it's like, you have no idea they just throw stuff at the walls.
They do. Are in terms of physical violence, is that something that concerns you?
No.
It's
definitely a reality of my life, yeah. But
and you're a Second Amendment guy. You're
big Second Amendment guy. My friends are very, I have a great security team.
You have a security team.
I have a security team, yeah.
You take certain precautions.
We take a lot of precautions, yeah.
Yeah, I know Madison to be a pretty knowledgeable about guns. So if anyone tries anything, I think they're in for it.
Well, it'll be a fun fight. That's for sure. Whoever wins, it'll be a fun last couple minutes.
I mean, I need to get better. We need to go hunting for the alligators. Is it crocodiles or alligators?
Alligators.
Alligators.
Yeah, they got to be tagged and just a certain time of the season. But if you ever want to go shark fishing, bow fishing for sharks. Bow fishing for sharks is one of the greatest sources of joy you'll ever have in your life.
I don't know what that is, but
So you're going to take a bow and arrow, you're going to lean out of a boat, and you're going to try and not get killed by a shark while you're trying to kill the shark.
A great white, or
it depends what jurisdiction you're in.
Can you eat a shark or eat?
You can eat a shark, yeah. They don't taste that good raw, but you can also donate the meat. There's a lot of things you can do with them.
Well, I would like to do that with you at some point. This was another little headline. I don't know what this was. Pleads guilty in case of bringing loaded handgun. Was this an accident? I guess sometimes
this was an accident. You know what?
Yeah. Misdemeanor or?
I don't think I didn't get charged for anything for that. I don't think. I think it was. Yeah,
it was like a citation or something.
It was a citation.
Where was
but
this?
It's a fine. The fine with the TSA is annoying. But that was, I believe, in the Charlotte airport.
That happens sometimes.
Yeah, but you know what? And then also, I had two backpacks. One I used as a range bag. One I used as my travel bag, and just got it mixed up. And I was going through an airport, and then, I knew the TSA guys at this airport, and they were helpful. They were buddies, and they were like, Congressman, there's a gun in your bag. And I was like, and then, a really kind TSA officer was kind of, you could see
He was trying
like,
to help you.
He was being like, can I get rid of it? Just he wasn't offering.
He was really trying to help you.
Yeah, but then I was like, man, this is going to get FOIA requested right away. I was like, it's going to be so bad for you and it's going to be worse for me.
Good on you for not
like, don't
putting
worry
him in
about
a tough
it.
spot.
Oh, absolutely, man. Come on. You can't ask.
I've never told this story, but it wasn't a gun. It was something else, a weapon, not a firearm, but it was in an airport.
A bazooka, yeah.
And they did the same thing. They turned off their body cam. They turned off their I got to write some memoirs and tell some more. They turned off their body camera. Say, O'Keefe, just go outside and throw it in the dumpster.
Yep. And
I won't say what I was. 'Cause I don't want them to lose their jobs, but there are some good people out there.
There are some really good people. Yeah, and the people who are just like, it's and oftentimes it's the law enforcement officers on the ground at the scene who have more ability to affect change for a certain crime, than most of your court systems do. And so that's why I hate that they have just vilified law enforcement so much in this country, because so many of the good people who are there who, whether they're finding marijuana on a kid and it's just like, dude, they're like, oh, this is a good kid. I can just scare him and this won't happen again, instead of ruining his life. And so, and again, I don't condone marijuana for, kids to use or anything like that. But I just think that we need good people in law enforcement. We need good teachers. We need good people in law enforcement, just because they shape the minds of our children.
Yeah, there are some good people, and then there are some people who just say they're following orders, and those people
the bootlickers.
The bootlickers.
Those people need to find take a long walk off a short dock.
I want to.
James, this is completely off topic. I want to get back to that.
Oh, tell me.
DJ Veritas.
DJ Veritas is
phenomenal.
Still,
he's a great guy.
I've gotten better at DJing. I know you attended the Fountain Blue. I was not DJing. I
want to see you DJ, but if you remember, you used to dye your hair white for that.
I do. I do some dye, so I get an alter ego kind of situation.
But it's starting to look like it's not dyed anymore.
Oh boy. I've had some. Speaking of wisdom. Wisdom.
Wisdom. Yep. It's
wisdom.
The crown
gray
of wisdom.
hair. It'll happen to you in time.
And my girl found one the other day. Yeah.
Do you have any gray hairs yet?
She found one just recently. Yeah.
The girl in question is sitting on the other side of the glass. I kind of do alter ego, wear a bulletproof vest, and because I'd wear a bulletproof vest. I'm just going to wear this on the outside because it's just like embrace it. And there is me at the Burning Man, actually.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that video.
Burning Man. That was a very strange place. But yeah, I was DJing, and we'll have a party at AmFest this year.
Oh, okay. We'll try and make it.
And I know that you've done that before. But thank you for attending some of these events. I appreciate
Excellent,
that
man.
very much.
You boggle the mind of what's possible for people to be able to do.
I'm a creative. I'm an artist, and I'm a storyteller. I'm a journalist, and I think people think, why does he do the music? It's because it's just very similar to what I do for making videos. You get a timeline. You crop it up. You put music over it. It's
how do you build it up? Where's the crescendo? What's the denouement?
Exactly.
Like? Yeah.
Everything. So it's very. Without the music, there never would have been Project Veritas. By the way, we talked a little bit about Project Veritas. And I know that I spoke to you during this, what happened to me. What was your view of it? Do you just think that people were envious? Do you think it was a power play?
So I'll tell you.
You knew some of these folks.
I did. And so this was before I really got to talk to anyone involved, including you. From the outside, and this is also from, I'm a decently well-informed guy. It seemed like it was large organizations, malevolent organizations, whether it's Big Pharma that you were going after at the time or some other enemies that you've crossed before, were then, probably just waiting for a right opportunity to be able to take revenge on you. This is what it looked like from the outside. And so I'm guessing, just based on and again, I'm not involved in it, but based on my cursory look at the situation, I'm assuming, the main culprit on your board was a very jealous man. Probably, didn't understand why you were so great, why he couldn't be that great. And then I'm guessing that there were powers that be, because, someone who is that petty normally isn't that smart to be able to figure out how to take you away from your own creation. And so I'm assuming, this is just my guess, just my view on it, is that most likely one of your enemies you've created, probably Big Pharma with as much money as they have to throw around, probably then was just looking, and you probably sent some of their guys out, some of their finders, to go see if they could find someone who had ill will towards you. And then once they found him, they created this idea. And whether they confronted him directly with this information, or if they just kind of led him to the conclusions on his own, but as a crafty manipulator can, then we're able to get him to double cross you. That's just what it looked like from the outside.
And sometimes you don't. We're trying to get to the bottom of that. And in fact,
have you gotten to do depositions yet?
We did all the depositions. We haven't published all of them.
If you can't talk about it, I understand.
I can. There's a couple parts of them are under seal, but it's a public proceeding. So
I love depositions.
Me too.
Yeah.
And it was very hard to relive that for me because these are very petty. The mistake I made is I made some poor choices in who I surrounded myself with, and the challenge for me was, where do you find someone whose price is their life? I didn't even know that at the time.
Rare.
I learned that because if your price is not your life, then the enemy will just, leverage whatever the weakness is. So I had people who I had a lot of folks who, there were a lot of talented people there. And the undercover people were very talented. Even people like Christian Hartsock, who I don't get along with him anymore, very talented. I think misguided, but very talented. But you have to have integrity in my business. You have to be so unbreakable and so unbendable that when the entire weight and force comes down on you, you stand tall and you take it. When
the Spartans at the hot gates, when Xerxes, says he's going to blot out the sun, you have to just sit there with no fear, saying, "Come on."
Or you have fear and you still take it. If they ask you to sign a piece of paper saying your colleague broke the law, you have to say, "I will not do that. I will not bear false witness." And I remember sitting in my conference room with these people, 60 employees, 65 employees, looking to my left, looking to my right. I remember thinking, how many of these people would take a $100,000 bribe? Now, I don't know that anyone did, but I remember thinking, like half of them would.
And what's crazy is congressmen are cheaper to buy than that.
Cheaper, yeah, 50,000, 60,000. There was one FBI agent who published my then girlfriend's text messages.
No.
Yeah, just Kyle Seraphin, and I went through all that, and that was the hardest thing I've ever been through. I'm still kind of, I forgive in the Christian sense, but the thing about me is I always get to the bottom of what happened. So I deposed all these people, and in the depositions we discovered that certain board members had investments in various companies, pharmaceuticals, LLCs. Total conflict of interest. Didn't disclose it. And
now, were they using your money for that, or was that their personal money? They soliciting?
They were soliciting our donors to invest, our staff to invest, and they weren't. So these people were in business together, man. They were in business.
That's the worst.
And I know. I mean, I'm clean as a whistle. I have no outside investments in the sense of that. I don't have any other LLCs or anything like that. I'm just, certainly you have to disclose that. But anyways, we've only got 5-10 minutes left, and I want to ask you about. We could spend an hour on this, but maybe 5-10 minutes about your accident and just looking back on that. Now that you are, Madison, 30 years old. When was your birthday?
August 1st.
How does it feel like to be in your 30s?
I feel weaker, slower. I'm just kidding. No, I feel great. I feel fantastic. I haven't felt the difference yet. I look at my older brother. He's 4.5 years older than me. He still seems to be in his prime. And so I think I guess.
So they say 32-year-old's cells are the strongest. Stem cells are the strongest, but 30s for me, the mid 30s are the best years so far, at least. So now, as a 30-year-old man looking back, was 18 years old this happened to you?
Yes.
18 years old. Where did you find the strength to rebuild your life after an accident like that?
Yeah, so I was a senior in high school. I had been nominated to the Naval Academy. I didn't get in, but I'd been nominated by my congressman. And I thought that I had some pretty good physical prowess. I could speak well. My mind was very sharp for an 18-year-old. And then I faced myself tapping my buddy on spring break out of my high school senior year, saying, "Hey, I'll take over at the next exit." We're in Florida driving. We're not far from here, actually. I was taking to Halifax Hospital. But anyways, we're driving back up to North Carolina to go home, and I remember hitting him, saying, "Hey, I'll take over at the next exit." And he said, "Okay." So I leaned back for a nap. Now, for whatever reason, he thought it'd be better as a group activity. And so in the middle of the day, two Christian young men, we weren't drinking or anything like that. He falls asleep in the driver's seat, and then I wake up.
Fell asleep.
Yeah. and then we run headlong into a concrete barricade. And then
How fast was it going?
it was probably 70, 80 miles an hour, somewhere in there.
70 miles an hour. Were you wearing a seatbelt?
I was, yes. But being leaned back in my seat, it potentially did more harm than good.
And your legs were up on the dash?
My legs were up on the dash, so airbag explodes. And again, this is not my memory. This is just what's recounted to me from people, eyewitnesses, from my friend at the car. The driver and I are still good friends. There was some question of what his actions were afterwards, but after a lot of talks with him, I believe he came back to save my life. The car caught flames. My diaphragm ruptured. My kidney was ripped off. My spine broke at the T12 vertebrae. I was covered in burns on the lower half of my body. I had a traumatic brain injury. They had to puncture my airway to be able to get oxygen to me. Both my lungs were punctured. I had severe internal bleeding. And then, I find myself coming back to consciousness, where I can remember, in an ICU unit. And to be someone that valued my ability to speak, but now no longer being able to speak, to be someone who valued my physical prowess, to now, I was 6'3", 6'4", 225 pounds.
You were 6'3"?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
And then, 225 pounds, could deadlift, over 600 pounds. I was great.
You were deadlifting 600 pounds at 18.
Yeah.
Were you playing football or?
I was playing high school football, yeah.
What was your position?
Middle linebacker.
Linebacker?
Yeah, I just like hitting people. It's fun. Yeah. And then I wake up in a hospital and my ability to speak is gone. I can't walk. I can't.
How many days were you unconscious for, or how long were you?
Yeah, I started getting my memories back. Like I can remember about 3 months after the accident. Yeah. And now with some of that, I was comatose. A lot of it, I was in surgery. Some of it I was awake for, but I just, the traumatic brain injury, I don't have memories from that time. If you look at my hands, you can see this, your thumb muscle here. It is significantly atrophied on this side. I can't feel most of this arm.
So you can't really move your fingers the same.
Yeah. So, this one, I can go very quickly, but this one, I really have to really close my eyes and think to touch my pinky and my thumb together.
That's you.
It's great if someone.
Is that you?
Yeah, that's me playing football.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, wow, I have no idea how you found that picture. But yeah, then when somebody, when someone brings a hot plate to the table and they're like, "Be careful, it's a hot plate," I'll just grab it and look at them because I can't feel the hands.
So yeah, it doesn't feel.
Yeah, but going through that was very difficult. But for the first part of it, I'd say for the year and a half afterwards, I fully believed I was going to recover my full abilities again. I just believed in a miracle. It was really after it kind of set in that I was most likely, barring a miracle or a massive medical advancement, I was not going to walk again. That's
you
when
had
it got
hope
very
until
difficult.
you didn't.
Yeah, had hope until I didn't.
And your legs are you have legs? Are they?
I have legs. Yeah,
they're not like artificial
prosthetics.
legs.
No, it's my real legs. But
It's your real legs, and they're paralyzed, or
they're paralyzed. Yeah. So the T12 vertebrae is right below your sternum. Now I gained back a significant portion of my body. I can't use my right abductors, but I can use my left. There's certain parts of my legs because of where I was hurt on the spinal cord. There's certain parts of it's not a straight line, and so some things work, some things don't. But yeah, I credit it to a really, really great family. My brother left college to come back, be home with me, take care of me. And then I just credit it to a really strong foundation in my walk with Christ. I was raised as like a real Christian. Not somebody who just says, "Oh, yeah, I was raised in church."
Did you, kind of the whole when I was on house arrest for 3 years, I was like, "Why have you forsaken me?" That kind of pity.
There was a lot. I remember it was my
growth.
brother actually. He came into my room. I was so angry, just so angry at God. Just like
how
God.
long?
Again, this is after I lost hope. But this is probably about a 4 or 5 month period of just being in a very dark place. And I remember my brother came to my room and he was like, "Man, I just want to yell at God." And what was going on? And my brother was like, "Well, Maddie, I think God can take it. You should yell at him." And then, left and I had, some very candid conversations with the Lord and, made a decision not to take my own life. It was definitely a huge temptation, but the reason being is just because I decided that I could still make a difference.
You thought about it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was. Did
you take steps to do that?
I had I made a T-graph, a decision T-graph. Pros and cons to living or dying. But
wow.
One, didn't want my last action on earth to be a sin, and then two, didn't. My parents had already gone through so much with me. My whole family had. I didn't want to. If I had died in the accident, it probably would have been an easier death. Yeah, but in hindsight now, and because I remember my mother especially, she used to tell me all the time, like, one day you'll get so far beyond this that you'll look back and almost be thankful it happened. And
Is that true?
seeing what I was going to face in the years following that, I completely would not change anything. It forged a grit inside of me that I would not have had otherwise. And seeing what I was going to go through, when I had to go out in the jet ski because of what people were saying, going through losing an election for ridiculous reasons, doing what's right and being punished for it. Those things, if you don't have a strong sense of self and a strong sense of who you are and that you have a purpose on this earth, I think that could break you. I think that could take you beyond the point of repair.
A different type of pain having media lie about you versus a random physical hardship, I suppose.
Yes, but there's still a lot of because the media lying about you is someone saying lies about you. Going through this kind of an accident for my personality type is now you're telling lies to yourself. Is because then you're starting to ask yourself, to this day I feel a lot of shame about not being strong enough to overcome it, not being strong enough to just take the hit and not get hurt. Which I know is ridiculous. I mean, obviously, but I'm sure you can relate on some level. But having to find who you are so deep in the pits of despair and know that everything in this life can be taken from you and that you're basically essentially living on borrowed time now. So you should live your life and make every single day count. There's no other option.
Wow. Charlie Kirk would say, James, love yourself. That's how he would kind of put it. So you kind of went through that at 18.
Yeah.
Kind of finding out who you really are.
Exactly.
When you're back up against the wall. You're this 6'4", 225, and then you're in the hospital. So who am I, right?
Right. Who's Madison? Like, without everything, who am I?
Yeah.
That was the big question that I wrestle with. But it gives you such a good sense of self and gives you such a good sense of, when things do get tough, you know what to rely on. You know how to rebuild your psyche and stay strong throughout really difficult times. But there's really this is the unfortunate fact of life is that there's really no other way to gain that than aside from going through a difficult trial.
Do you want to have children?
Absolutely.
Are you physically able to?
I am. Thank God. Yeah.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it was the.
That's a question I get asked a lot, by the way.
I get asked that question all the time. I get asked that question. That is a funny thing. But so this was one of the funniest situations. Because right after my accident for probably a couple years, I was incapable of doing anything like that. And I went to a prayer breakfast with my dad. I'm 19 years old, maybe 20. And I'm at this prayer breakfast with my dad, and it's a lot of these guys I grew up in the church with and so I know all these men, and we're sitting there. It's like 6 a.m. We're all praying at the table, and then the guy on stage is just God, we're praying for man. I won't use the word he used, but we're praying for Madison Cawthorn's manhood. We're praying that it kicks back to work because God, we know that we all here love it, and we know that you created it. And we want that to work well for. And being like a 20-year-old kid in church, just hearing that, I was like. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, everybody's looking at me. That's crazy. But then, thank God they prayed because, then
it just started working.
Yeah. Thank God.
Was it that day or?
No, it was later on.
It didn't require any specific medical attention.
Nope. Yeah.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. So
that's a huge blessing.
That's a huge blessing. Oh, could
that's
you imagine?
Big deal.
Yeah. That's a huge, I think men can understand that that's just a really,
of course,
yeah,
and your personal life. Are you? Is there anyone that you said there's a girlfriend in your life?
Yep, pretty girl sitting right out there. And then I will say that my life has probably never been better than it is now. Mm-hmm. I have such a great group of friends, such a great sense of community, such a great walk with God right now. I have such an amazing family. My family is bar none the best. I have the best parents and brother you could ever have in the world.
That's what matters.
Yeah, and it's so rare to hear these days that people are friends with their parents, like you were saying earlier. I mean, my parents are some of my best friends. I talk to my mom every single day.
Yeah, I find that to be, as I've gotten older and traveled all over the world and met tens of thousands of people, it's very rare to have two loving parents who are not completely insane. My mother and father are just decent, hardworking, blue-collar people from upstate New York.
Just good people.
Just good people, non-judgmental, just decent.
And I'm sure they push you to be better.
My dad's the hardest working man I've ever met.
So is my dad.
My mother is just this kind, down-to-earth, woman. and the combination of that, that's very rare.
Yeah. And my mother is also, she homeschooled me. She's so shrewd. I mean, my mother is an incredible woman.
She knows people.
She knows people, and she understands me extremely well. She knows my short-sightedness in some things, my where I can be overeager in other things, and she gives some of the best advice a young man could ever have. So.
Well, Madison, this has been great. We could keep it going. I think we will keep it going. I do want to take you sailing.
Yes.
On the sailboat. And then we'll film a little bit of that, some conversation one day. The boat's not ready yet, but
well, it's not really a boat if it doesn't have to be in the shop often.
Exactly. This is a sailboat, so the sails work, but the diesel engine. So, anything else you want to discuss? Any other things I missed?
James, I have such a great, profound sense of respect for you as a guy. Knowing that you have faced great struggles in your life, and I chalk you up there with a lot of the conservative greats, and because you're about 10 years older than me. I learned a lot from you, as I was younger, coming into the political space, and then one thing I think you will be happy is you incite a significant level of fear on the Hill. People are very afraid of you, and it also helped me in a lot of situations.
Afraid of being exposed?
Afraid of being exposed for things, because so many people have things to hide on the Hill, or they know they're phonies. And so then people have this healthy fear that, maybe one of my staffers is undercover for O'Keefe. But I remember after I spoke about you, after the FBI raid on the House floor, there were a lot of people I realized assumed that you and I had this incredibly close bond. Which, you and I are friends. But I think it gave them a trepidation, being like, well, we shouldn't cross Madison. He might get James O'Keefe on us. And that was one of the things I loved the most.
It kind of doesn't surprise me. I think you're certainly people are afraid. They got things to hide.
Yes. People that have things to hide are afraid.
Yeah. It was a very spiritual thing, actually. It's like you have this sort of skeletons in your closet, and you're phony, and they're afraid. And I appreciate you. We have gotten to know each other, and I always appreciate the warmth that you've extended to me. And I see in you, just talking to you right now versus the man you were 5 years ago, a lot of growth and wisdom. And I hope you continue that trajectory. You're still going to learn some things. I mean, you're still going to go through some crazy shit.
I have no doubt.
I guarantee that. I will too, by the way. But I don't obsess over it. I don't worry about it. You just got to, there's a stoicism in you that I don't think was there 5 years ago. And it's kind of like the book of Job, which we read recently, kind of your story. That worked out well for Job.
It did. It did indeed.
At Veritas, it was the lost my chief of staff, lost my producer, my office got destroyed by a hurricane, I was raided by the FBI, and then I was fired by Project Veritas. I mean, it was like I remember my editor Freddie was like, James, I don't know if I could take this anymore. But it does make you. It does make you stronger. Makes you wiser.
And James, this is more so for your audience, because I know you know this lesson, but this is something I learned after my accident. Is I can be sad, be a sad guy in a wheelchair. I can be a happy guy in a wheelchair and a motivated guy in a wheelchair. Either way, I'm still going to be in a wheelchair. Who do you want to be when you're facing terrible circumstances? And I know that you know that, and I hope your audience can take some solace in that. Is that what you can't affect what happens to you, but you can absolutely affect what you do with it and how you respond to it.
It's a cliche, but you can only control what you do.
That's exactly correct.
You can't change other people. You just control what you do. What was your favorite part of this conversation today?
You know what? Honestly, it's seeing the new again. I know
the headquarters.
The new headquarters. Yeah, this is awesome. This is significantly better than New Jersey. I will say that.
It's West Palm Beach, the free state of Florida. I love it here. Madison, until we see each other again on the sailboat, thank you for being here.
James, thank you, brother.
Thank you. Every story we tell here at O'Keefe Media Group, breaking the news, going places others won't, taking risks others won't, is powered by your support and by our partners at American Independence Gold. All right, so we're here with Ryan Durda, Senior Vice President, American Independence Gold. Lots of people are talking about gold. Ryan, tell us the difference between investing in precious metals and regular stocks or mutual funds.
The easiest answer I can give you to that is with gold, silver, precious metals in general, there's no counterparty risk. So when I say counterparty risk with a stock, for example, if we look at, let's say, Apple, the entire board is one of your counterparties. The CEO, Tim Cook, is one of your counterparties. The staff that is responsible for developing products, marketing, Those are counterparties. So you have risk in the success or failure of that individual counterparty. With gold and silver, there's no counterparty. There's no CEO of gold. There's no CEO of silver. It's a tangible asset that you own. In the case of a bond, right, we'll use the U.S. Treasury, right? The counterparty is the United States government. And right now, there's a little bit of lack of faith that exists in the United States government and or its ability to make good on its debt.
What types of investment portfolios would benefit from exposure to gold?
I mean, any and all. I think one of the most misleading things that people are told is that they have a well-diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, bond funds. And the reality of that situation is they own one single asset class, which is they own securities. So albeit they might be diversified within a single asset class, they're not truly diversified. True diversification would be that you have a portfolio that exists of multiple asset classes that are non-correlated. So somebody with a portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and bond funds would need to have gold and silver outside of that portfolio in order to call it a true portfolio hedge.
As of the time of this recording, what is the price of gold?
3,800 and change. To give you the exact number, I would have to,
Is that an all-time high?
It's absolutely. We've had 38 new all-time highs this year alone. Last year, I believe we hit the 74 all-time high mark.
And what is that like compared to, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
To give a little history, gold, if we look at just from the beginning of this century, right? So that's the year 2000, the beginning of the century, it's 25 years ago. Gold itself has actually outperformed the entire S&P 500 threefold. Had you purchased gold in the year 2000, you're up 1,500% today. If you invested in the S&P 500 index and you reinvested all the dividends, you're up about 500% and change. Right. So gold just hands down been an outperformer relative to the stock market indexes.
Is there a risk getting exposure to gold now after that huge increase?
All investments carry a certain level of risk. So I'll give you the disclosure there. Gold is what's called a tier 1 asset, which is a central bank definition, simply meaning that it is safe and it's liquid. Gold, by definition of the central banks, is a tier 1 asset. So that means it's a safe investment. It's literally one of the safest things that you can own in your portfolio. So once again, all investments carry a certain level of risk, but gold is considered to be the safest thing that you can own. Most people look at the price of gold today in nominal terms, meaning they simply look at it based on the dollar price of gold. But if we were to look at gold valued in other things, i.e., if we valued gold against, again, I'll go back to the S&P, the value of the S&P priced in gold, gold is still dirt cheap. And the same holds true with the NASDAQ or the Dow. If we look at the price of gold relative to all the currency in circulation, gold is still dirt cheap. So do I think now is still a great time to buy gold? Hands down, yes.
Right now, I'm offering my followers in the trenches this incredible one-time opportunity to credit your account up to $10,000 in free gold and silver on a qualifying purchase. That's right, this will help you get started protecting your wealth with real physical gold and silver while these historic price levels are still within reach. Go to O'KeefeMediaGold.com, that's O'KeefeMediaGold.com, or call 833-324-4653, 833-324-GOLD. Again, that's O'KeefeMediaGold.com or 833-324-GOLD. Take action, get the facts, and protect your future, because freedom isn't given, it's secured. This is James O'Keefe. Don't just watch history, own a piece of it. What is your price? Because if your price is not your life, then you are for sale.